Welcome to the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World and to our exhibition, The Lost World of Old Europe. I'm Roger Bagnall, the director of the Institute, and I could not have imagined 2.5 years ago when we opened our doors that New York University would be playing host to an exhibition like this. When I was first interviewed to be director, I asked how far back in time the Institute's scope would be. Would it go as far as the Neolithic? And people said, oh no, we're all about the historic periods. Well, 2.5 years later, we are in the Neolithic. We have moved back 5,000 years from what we thought was our core, and we have embraced a world that I, for one, didn't know existed when I was educated many years ago. Nobody ever talked about the fact that there was a great civilization in Europe well before the pyramids, before the ziggurats, before the Mycenaeans, before Periclean Athens, before all of that. There was an extraordinary civilization in the Danube River basin. And that's what we have been able for the first time to bring to the United States and welcome you to.
Okay, I'm David Anthony. I'm a professor of anthropology at Hartwick College, where I teach in the anthropology department. I'm guest curator for this exhibit, which is The Lost World of Old Europe, at the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World. And we are in Gallery 2, looking at an exhibit of pottery from the Cucutaen culture. This exhibition brings together artifacts from 12 different museums in 3 countries, Bulgaria, Romania, and Moldova. It is the first time these artifacts have been exhibited in the United States. None of them have been here before. They are artifacts from the first civilization of Europe. They date between the oldest objects in here are actually from about 6,000 BC. But most of the objects date between 5,000 and 4,000 BC. They represent a cycle of cultures that existed in southeastern Europe, centered in what is today Bulgaria and Romania. That rose to an extraordinary height of sophistication and achievement, and then fairly suddenly collapsed, and were replaced by cultures that were at a much lower and simpler level of development. So in that sense, they truly are lost cultures. That's where the lost world of old Europe comes from. Outstanding objects from the show, I would say first there is an entire gallery of female figurines which have become quite famous. And they've been featured in works by the archaeologist and comparative mythologist Maria Gimbutas in a series of coffee table books. The Language of the Goddess, The Civilization of the Goddess, The Gods and Goddesses of Old Europe. And it was really Maria Gimbutas at UCLA who came up with the term Old Europe in her first book of this type, published in 1974. So there's an entire gallery of figurines that she is focused on as the origin of what she presented as a kind of utopian ideal society that was organized and dominated by females whose values of nurturance and aesthetics dominated the entire society. These ideas of hers have generated a very large following of women who are very highly dedicated to her idea of this almost a utopia that existed in the Neolithic of ancient Europe. This exhibit is the first time these figurines have been brought to the United States so that people who are interested in these ideas can see them. The idea that old Europe constituted an idealized world without violence, where women were dominant, and values of aesthetics and nurturance were the center of the society, is highly debated. And we present that debate also in this exhibit. The other things that are really important in this exhibit are the evidence for a politically stratified society in old Europe. At one time it was thought that these cultures were egalitarian, with no real division between rich and poor. But to my right is an exhibit of the gold from Varna. Varna is the richest cemetery known in the entire world, dated to 4500 BC. It is the richest early cemetery. It's the richest cemetery known in the world dated anywhere before 3500 BC. There's more gold in the cemetery of Varna than has been recovered from all of the rest of the Old World put together before 3500 BC. And the gold at Varna is found in only a few graves. There are 310 graves in the cemetery of Varna. Only 60 of them contain gold, and the great majority of the gold was contained in 4 extraordinarily rich graves, one of which is partially exhibited in the case to my right and in the case beyond that. So the realization that these societies were politically stratified with rich people and a sort of a middle class and poor people is an idea that came into the consciousness of archaeologists through the excavations of the Varna cemetery. The gold of Varna has never been displayed in the United States before. It's here for the first time. Another highlight of the show is the invention of copper metallurgy. The invention of metallurgy is something that affected all of us, not just the societies of old Europe. And it was these people who figured out how to extract copper from greenish and bluish rocks. Really a magical process. By pounding these rocks up, mixing it with charcoal, and then raising it to 1083 degrees centigrade inside a closed kiln. Once you did that, what you had put in as rock and charcoal came out as pure copper. A magical process that allowed the people of these societies to produce unlimited quantities of copper. Immediately, massive, large-scale mining began. Some of these mines are 90 feet deep, carved with antler picks down into limestone and dolomite rock to extract the copper ore. The copper that was extracted from the ore was then given to specialized craftsmen who melted it, used the molten copper to pour into molds. You can see cast-made objects. Some of the earliest objects made of molten copper poured into casts in the world are on display in this gallery. For a favorite piece, one of the favorite pieces is The Thinker in Gallery 1, which is one of the most famous pieces of prehistoric European art. It's on the cover of art books. It's been included in art books all over the world. It's probably the most famous piece in this exhibit, but it's famous partially because it was excavated a long time ago, and it's had a long time to sort of slowly sink into the consciousness of the Western world. Many of the other objects in this exhibit are just as interesting, or even more interesting in my estimation, but people don't know about them, and they haven't been known for so long. So there hasn't been time for them, or the opportunity for them to get into the consciousness of people from the West. The gold of Varna is certainly one of the highlights of this show, and it's a great coup that we have that here. This extraordinary table full of Cucuteni ceramics is another highlight of the show. The aesthetic sophistication and the technological sophistication that are contained in these pots are based on the same pyrotechnology that made it possible to smelt copper and invent a copper age. So the pottery and the copper that you see around are intimately connected in the same sophisticated pyrotechnology. And they're probably connected to women, that's true. It's probably female potters who were the first people to realize how you could extract copper from these rocks, which had to happen in high temperature kilns, initially developed to make pots like this, and then ultimately transferred and used to smelt copper.